I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 231 of the podcast. So thanks so much for spending some of your time with us today to hear stories of entrepreneurs within our community of Rochester, Minnesota. Right now, we're on a break for the summer, so we're taking a pause from sharing new podcasts. However, please don't unsubscribe. Please continue to listen in because we'll be sharing some of the most downloaded and some of your favorite podcasts over the past 5 years. So we have over 230 podcasts to choose from, which we will be sharing our favorites, your favorites, and the most downloaded podcasts with you over the course of the summer. So even if you've listened into these before, you're still going to learn a lot. I was obviously in these conversations, recording these conversations, edited these conversations, and even listening into it today, I learned a lot. Once again, coming at it from a different perspective now. So there's still definitely so much to learn from these conversations and great stories of entrepreneurship and what it's like to be an entrepreneur here in the community. So you found the podcast in some way, but you can find our podcast every week on our website at rochesterrising.org. Our podcasts are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel, so you can check them out, as well as through the weekly Collider newsletter, which is probably one of the best places to connect with our stories and never miss any of them. And you can sign up for the newsletter on our website as well. Rochester Rising is part of the Rochester-based nonprofit Collider that activates, connects, and empowers entrepreneurs here in our community. So you can learn more about Collider on the Collider website, collider.mn. So to keep Rochester Rising going and to keep it as part of our entrepreneurial community here in Rochester, Minnesota, we have started a digital tip jar. If you have gotten any value out of our podcast, out of our articles, learned anything that has helped you and your personal or professional growth, please consider donating to Rochester Rising to keep this storytelling platform going. You can learn more about our tip jar through the link in our show notes. All right, so today I am resharing a very popular podcast from 2019 with Christi Jorde, the former owner of Millhouse Designs, and Emily Watkins, the owner of Rochester Women Magazine. So this was from podcast episode 154, which was originally released on November 27th, 2019. And this was part of a series we did in 2019 called From the Edge, which was talking about trends in entrepreneurship. So usually 2 or 3 guests came into the podcast studio with a trend in mind that they wanted to talk about, and we just sat down and had a wonderful conversation. They were typically one of our most popular podcasts, and this was a wonderful conversation I have to share with you today with Christi and Emily. I very vividly remember having this conversation, even though I did not remember all the nuances in it, and again, learned so much today listening back into the conversation. It was extremely nostalgic for me to go back to that place and time, recording in our old podcast studio, talking about a lot of things that I have not remembered for a long time, like putting out our digital magazine, which we did in October 2019, and apparently registering a domain name for a bakery that I still have yet to launch. So lots of things, and now I'm very curious about what that domain name is, and I'm going to have to look into it. But great conversation to share with you today about reality of being an entrepreneur, being vulnerable, and most importantly, being a woman in business. So I'll leave you with our conversation with Emily and Christi.
I'm Emily Watkins, and I own Empowered Wellness and Fitness Studio. I am a personal trainer. I've had the business for 8 years, and we started off offering group fitness classes, and it has now morphed into just personal training. So I work one-on-one with clients. And then recently I sort of got into a deal where I'm going to be purchasing Rochester Women Magazine from Jory Johnson, and I'm really excited about that opportunity. I've been contracting with her to put together the November-December 2019 issue, and now we're starting to work on the January-February 2020 issue, and it's been really exciting. There's a steep learning curve, but I am really excited to see where things go. I have lots of fun ideas and ways to make sure that lots of women in the area get their stories told. So,
awesome.
Excellent. My name is Christi Jorde, and I am the founder and designer at Millhouse Design. So it is an interior design firm, and I help homeowners uncover all of the potential in their home, and I actually work in office spaces as well. That's kind of been something I've been dabbling in unintentionally, but it's awesome. So I work on small-scale projects all the way to large renovations. I also do some marketing consulting, just because I've been in that field for 17 years. It's painful to say that out loud, but 17 years. So doing some marketing consulting on the side as well.
Cool. So we were here today to talk about, things we're seeing in the entrepreneurial community, trends. Yeah, I think we have some great things to discuss here today. So I'll let you ladies take it from here.
All right.
You go ahead, Christi.
I'm on deck. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. Rochester is going through an interesting time, I think, with the tremendous amount of growth, and you see so many entrepreneurs right now. And I just see that, that's a national trend too. Like, being an entrepreneur is super trendy right now. It's like, you see all these Instagram feeds and everything, and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to be an entrepreneur too. So you see that a lot. And I think it's a fascinating development. My dad was an entrepreneur, so I grew up with that. I grew up watching what that looked like and living in a home with an entrepreneur. And so I probably saw, the more dirty, gritty side of being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And he went through a lot of different phases, owned a lot of different businesses, and some were modestly successful, and then some absolutely failed. So I've never had this like glossy, shiny vision of entrepreneurialism. I've always thought, oh, it's a grind, and it's one of those things where you let your fear talk to you more than your hopes talk to you. And so I look at that as an interesting time, just in the world where people are really glamorizing it. And it's an awesome thing, but it's also something where it's great to see, like, the Chamber of Commerce and all of these other resources talk about being an entrepreneur, talk about resources, talk about where do you go when you need help. And because it can be a lonely road. You're doing things on your own. You don't have the interaction with somebody always day to day. So where are these resources? So I've seen that kind of pop up a little bit more, and it's an exciting time to see that as well, just so that people can feel like they're not alone, and if they actually want to make that decision to jump into that it's something that's doable. But there's another side of it. It's not as glamorous as it looks on Instagram. You wake up and you grind all day. So, but it's a fun grind, at least. I don't know if you have thoughts on that as well.
Well, I was just going to say you're really lucky that you got to see that growing up, because I think not a lot of people do. My folks worked pretty standard jobs, although my dad worked for a guy who started his own company that was actually really successful. So kind of peripherally I saw that, but I didn't really see the day-to-day grind. But yeah, it's interesting. You are really lonely. And what was the thing that I was going to respond to that you said? I guess just talking about making money. Right. Like you don't just get to say, like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and go out and start making money right away. Like, you have to hustle all the time to be figuring out how you're going to get money for what you're doing. Unfortunately, we live in a world where you sort of need to have some resources in order to be able to survive. I feel like I'm really lucky because I have a husband who works a regular job and gets benefits. and a good income. So I sort of have a little more freedom than some people do to go out and try things. And if they fail, it's okay. I can still make sure that my family gets fed and we have a roof over our head. But a lot of people, I think, want the lifestyle because it's really fun. You can, work your own hours. Nobody's your boss. But the realities of being able to bring home a paycheck are a little bit scary. So that is to say that I feel like you're kind of lucky to be able to see the harder parts of that so that you were really realistic about it when you decided to get into it.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting, when you do something, as you well know, it brings forth this vulnerability and this fear while being exciting.
Right.
But you're putting yourself out there. You're not behind the guise of a company anymore. You don't get to kind of tuck away when something's not maybe going well.
Right.
And your PTO is no longer your own, all of those things. But, there is an amazing part of it, obviously, as well. And, I think about being an entrepreneur of my life. And I think I am not myself a millennial. I'm a titch older than a millennial, but I am what they call is the Oregon Trail generation.
Oh, really? Yes. Okay, that's me too, I guess.
That was the term.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that though.
Yes. I know. Isn't it funny? The second you say it, you're like, oh, yeah, I know who you are.
Yep.
So for me to watch millennials come onto the scene and I have such an appreciation for millennials, and I get that I am not the popular consensus on that, but I think millennials have just changed the course of the discussion about what you do for the rest of your life, that it's more about having a purpose-driven life. And I think that is such a beautiful notion that we can all learn from, especially us who are a little bit older, looking at that and going, I mean, that's kind of what we maybe all think about, and not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone is, needs to want to do that, actually. I mean, everybody talks about, you've got to follow your passion. You've got to follow your passion. And I think that is so overused and beaten to death, actually, because I think you can find a quest or a purpose in a company as well, because that's ultimately what it boils down to. But so for me to decide okay, this is what I'm going to do, it's about living a purpose-driven life. And I would imagine that's where you've been for quite some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really cool to do that, to wake up every day and be able to sort of chart my own course. That is really exciting, and it's hard for me to imagine being in a situation where I would have to have somebody else create my to-do list.
Yeah.
But then again, when you create your own to-do list, it's really never ending, and that can feel overwhelming also.
Yes. Yeah. And I hope to see, more tools and more coping skills being taught for entrepreneurs. And just, for people, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, coping skills and discipline. I mean, entrepreneurialism is about discipline.
That's very true.
Yeah. Just waking up, not letting yourself slip into I'm probably going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix today.
Yes. That's easy to do. I was thinking that when I was driving in. I'm like, man, I really just want to go home right now.
Yes.
No.
Yep.
Yeah. But I didn't. I'm here.
Yes. Thank you.
It's snowy and pretty. Let's get Hallmark on.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And I think, in terms of thinking of, balance and wellness, and, it's great to work hard, but it doesn't always equal money at the end too.
Right.
Yeah.
Time invested doesn't always mean money. And that's the really hard thing. I remember when I first started, and one of my friends who has, and there's, not to knock somebody who does the same job for their whole lives, I came from, my family all worked in the steel industry in Western Pennsylvania. They did the job from when they were 18 until they shut down the steel plant. But yeah, my friend anyway was like, if I had my own business, I just work all the time and make just all this money. I'm like, well, it doesn't work that, like,
Right.
like I wasn't making any money.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute.
I know. It was like, that was just kind of depressing. No, but yeah, thinking about, and I think we're starting to have this conversation about overall wellness, and that kind of fits into what you're doing, is that you do, like, I talk with a lot of people, particularly in like service, and like similar to you, Emily, because you could book as many like appointments.
Absolutely.
And you too, Christi. But at some point it's like you have to stop. You can't, can you make more money? Absolutely. Is that going to make you any happier? Probably not.
Right.
So it's that balance and starting to have that conversation and starting to talk about, when we're not doing good, when the business is failing, or when we're just tired, like that's all legitimate.
Yeah, and I think it brings about an interesting topic too, in terms of what you can say yes and no to, and having that skill to say no, because saying no is a skill.
It is.
To practice it.
Yes.
And when people do ask, like, oh, hey, can you volunteer for this? And can you do this? And can you do this? And it's like, yeah, I'd love to do all of that, but I have to make some money to pay my bills. And so that is, I think, as an entrepreneur too, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you feel, Emily, when you are an entrepreneur, people look at you like, and they always give you the same excuse. Yeah, but you'll get really great exposure.
Right. Yes. Yep. Just get your name out there. Yep. Which is important.
It is.
Yeah, but right. You can't volunteer your services, which is really tricky.
Yeah.
Really tricky. One thing that I have trouble with is my use of a couple different things. My schedule, first of all, because I'm currently training clients, and the ideal time for a lot of clients to train is time when I want to be at home, I'd like to work a standard work day from like 8 to 5, but a lot of people need to train after 5 o'clock. And so it's hard for me to know, it's hard for me to balance, like, I'd like that client, that's part of my income, but I also would like time with my family. That's tricky too. And then just, your workload and how you figure that out. I was going to talk about the recent publication that you guys put out, the e-magazine, which was so beautiful. But I loved the article in there about working smarter. I can't remember if it was working smarter, not longer, or something like that. But that is a huge thing. And I have this brand new planner where I'm supposed to write like an intention for the week, and then there's space for like 10 things to get done in a week,
That's
kind of
lot.
like, right,
That's
10 priorities. But it's so hard. I find myself writing things on there like, things that don't really matter. Like I shouldn't write on there like an idea for an article or something where it should be more priorities. So I feel like if I were better at prioritizing and making that really clear list of what I need to get done, I probably would feel a little bit better, and like I don't have to work from 6 in the morning until 10 at night or something.
Right.
Yeah. It's a really hard thing to do. Like I come in every morning and I fill up a Post-it note. Like it's super old school. And I had someone in the last podcast we did tell me about some app that's supposed to have like Post-its on there. But I'm like, no, I don't know, this is working. So unless someone comes and steals my Post-it note.
I love Post-its.
Yeah.
Keep 3M,
in business. That's right. A Minnesota company.
But
support local.
But yeah, I end up filling that thing up like every day. And then it's like, these aren't all like, and some of them don't get done because I just don't, because I'm trying to keep more of like a whatever. 9 to, I usually like 9 to 6, 9 to 5:30, something like that, because it's like, otherwise there's always stuff to do.
There is. It's a never-ending list. So you have to get really good at looking at that list and saying, this is really important or really timely. Like I really have to get this done by the end of the day today or whatever, or it's just not, and it's just not going to get done. Yeah.
I'm a personal development junkie, so I read all of these books, and I mean, it's like borderline ridiculous and obsessive, but I heard this amazing thing that this entrepreneur talked about, how she wakes up every morning and has a legal pad. So she's old school too. So she has the legal pad, and she just does this massive brain dump for the first 5 to 10 minutes of her day, so that she just gets it all out.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Yeah, and stops perseverating on things. And so she actually has gotten so good at it that there's the main list and then there's the ancillary list. So on the side is more home life stuff. So that, because it's so easy to combine the two when you're thinking about, oh gosh, I've got to get that booked and I've got to do that. I've got to make that appointment, that doctor's appointment, yada, yada. And then you can just get tripped up on yourself. And and it's so easy to just completely go down rabbit holes. Like, that's what drives me nuts in my day. I'm like, holy cow, I'm in a rabbit hole right now. And you just got to dig your way back out and figure out, what am I actually supposed to be working on? But this is what I love about being an entrepreneur, is that one of the things that, although working in office life, in corporate life, has been great and rewarding, and I've personally learned so incredibly much over these last 17 years. What I found could be frustrating in different work environments is that if you needed to get up and clear your head, or you needed to just get yourself in a different space, because I feel like we all go through that during the day. When you get up and you walk away in sometimes a work environment, what do you catch yourself doing? You're probably going and complaining about something in the office with someone. Yeah. And then you have completely sabotaged yourself for the rest of the day. And what I find myself now, I will catch myself and be like, all right, I'm totally procrastinating or avoiding doing something. I need to get up and I need to walk away. And at least I can go and do something productive now that makes me feel like, oh, okay.
Right. A load of laundry.
Yes. Yeah. And then you can get back into headspace that's maybe a little bit more productive or self-fulfilling for your day rather than destructive. Yeah. But yeah, there's just all sorts of tips and tricks and stuff. And it's nice to see that there's an avenue for all of that now, that people can talk about it a little bit more, I think, out in the world, like YouTube and the master classes and the TED Talks and all of that kind of stuff. There's so many awesome, like, mentors, essentially, that you can go to. And thank goodness.
You should compile a list for us.
Yes, I have my go-tos. I don't know if anybody's like a Brene Brown fan.
I have not read anything.
I haven't either. I always feel really bad saying that.
I know, me too. I know. Like,
it's on my list.
Shame.
I have
shame
12 pages of Goodreads.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a decade to get through them.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not happening.
I'm an Audible junkie, so I don't have time to sit down and read, so I listen to Audible books. Like, if you see me with headphones and I'm listening to some personal progress, something or other.
So that's an interesting thing that you bring up. So I love to read, and I love to read fiction, and I love to watch Netflix, like terrible shows or whatever, I love and I love the idea of reading self-help books or listening to podcasts and things like that. But I have this thing in my mind where I feel like I am not being productive when I do that stuff. How can I get that out of my head?
The things that I have listened to, and this is obviously just one person's opinion, the books I've listened to, the podcasts, the YouTube videos have been so life-changing for me that I can honestly say that who I was even a year ago is different than I am today, just because of that. Yeah. Because as anybody, not even an entrepreneur, just anybody in general in life, we go through and we F ourselves over on a regular basis with our own brain. And we tell ourselves that we're not good enough. We say horrible things to ourselves. We say things we'd never say out loud over and over and over again. And it just crushes our creativity. It crushes our spirit. And we slap on the smile and we tell everybody how great we're doing. We tell everybody how amazing life is because we live in this Instagram world where everything has to look perfect. Right. And yet we're like dying on the inside. And although there's different levels of what that death may be on the inside, it is for me, I can say that listening and finding some of the resources I've found has changed the dynamic in my own brain. It's changed how I view challenges. It's changed how I speak to myself. It's changed everything. So I feel like I am a way more effective human being, partner, mom, worker. All of that has changed. And it's also changed what I'm willing to accept in my life. And some of that's come with age. I think the second that I turned 40, I was like, yay, nay, yay,
yes,
nay,
definitely.
to the things that I was okay with.
Yeah.
But I would also say that listening to a lot of like the quote unquote self-help or whatever it is, like there's so many people that are just way smarter than me that have a ton of things to teach me. And I want to learn it all.
Yeah.
But I'm also a naturally very curious person, but I would highly suggest Brene Brown. Mel Robbins is another great resource. I've read some books that have literally just had me on my knees bawling and broke open pieces of myself that I didn't even realize were closed off. So that's
interesting.
That
kind of makes me think of, when you have an employer, usually you have a review, like an annual review, where you're kind of told, like, you're doing this well, you're not doing that well. And usually I think people are asked to do sort of a self-evaluation. But I feel like, as an entrepreneur, you don't get that. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that when you're reading those things, you are sort of evaluating yourself,
100%.
Sort of based on what the book is suggesting that you look at, the characteristics or your work habits or whatever. So that's an interesting.
Yeah. And it doesn't have someone's tainted lens on it. Because what I think happens in work environments is that we all know there's a lot of managers that shouldn't be managers. There's a lot of people who get in leadership positions that we all slap our forehead and go, how did that happen? And not to say that, there's some amazing managers. I've had some amazing people throughout my career lead me and guide me and be mentors for me. But there's also those people that are so caught up in their own stuff that they can't see clearly to help guide you in your own thing. And so I think even for people who work in an organization, what if you have a bad review? What, are you internalizing that? Are you making that, your narrative now, that you're not good enough? And I think that's the biggest fear, was the biggest fear, at least for me, and still is, if I'm being honest, like on a day-to-day basis. I have that narrative in my head that's like, who do you think you are? Like, why do you think you're good enough?
I think we all do.
Yeah, right.
Every day, pretty much.
Right. And I think that plays into so much of the mental health game, that we beat ourselves up so much.
Right.
Like it's just, and I think it's even with your personal training, there's so much of that, like your physical health ties into your mental health so much.
Absolutely.
So I can't even imagine how revolutionary that's been for some people.
Yeah, definitely. It's cool to see that.
Change lives.
Right. Yeah.
Well, maybe that'll be a nice transition point. So we were talking about Instagram and marketing. If you wanted to talk about some marketing trends that you're seeing.
Boy, that's a really good question. I don't ever consider myself on top of any trends.
Me either. Definitely not at all.
I do feel like, and this is, I'm sure everybody who's listening is going to be like, she has no idea what she's talking about, which is true. But I feel like Instagram seems to be a really big place to do things now. That's one thing that I'd like to do more of for both of the businesses now. Pictures seem to be a great thing. Pictures and videos. People love that. I don't know. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, and so they obviously do all kinds of things on social media. They do Snapchat. I don't do Snapchat. Is that a thing that you could do for your business?
I don't even know how. I'm a little bit too old for Snap. Like, it's all about the community that's on there, because none of my friends were on it.
Oh, really?
So I got no value out of it.
But that's interesting. Yeah. How long ago did you try it? Just out of curiosity.
it's probably been 2 years since it's been on my phone because I never put it on this phone. So it must have been at least 2 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just didn't have any, like none of my friends were on there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I do like the Instagram stories. Mm-hmm. I've seen more of that, even with maybe more on like a personal level, but like, because no one wants things out. I think maybe we're getting a little bit smarter about people not wanting things out there forever, which is why the Instagram stories, even though it's still there.
Yeah.
But I've been noticing a lot too with marketing and like I forget what they're called, like the follow-on ads or how the ads follow you everywhere. Once you're on Facebook, if you click on it, it started to really borderline creep me out a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, if you knew the back end of it, you get really creeped out.
Yeah, and the person who sat across me used to be an expert, but just as a random example, like I don't have kids. I saw in my Facebook feed, one of my friends who's in San Francisco now posted about it wasn't disposable. It was like I don't want to say it was a bamboo diaper, but maybe it was. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I want to read more about it. Clicked on it. Now I'm getting this diaper ad following me around everywhere. I'm like, where are you pulling this from? I have no kids. Like, it pretty much knows a lot about you. So I'm just like shocked that maybe because it's so off that I keep seeing it, like following me everywhere.
Yeah.
Like,
right. You would really notice
not
that.
only in the Facebook feed, but like in like just random web pages that that kind of creeps me out a little bit. And we've decided with a lot of things that we're doing not to like boost things or advertise through Facebook. Right. And I'm sure Facebook is going to listen to this because they probably have all kinds of AI listed, but it kind of like Facebook has the best like follow through to a web page in my opinion, but some of the stuff gets really like aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because now we're in my wheelhouse hardcore because my background is marketing. So marketing communications anyway. But yeah, it's been termed as like native advertising. There's a bunch of different terms for it too. But yeah, it is. I mean, everything is listening to you at this point in life. So, I mean, we all just need to like accept that fact right now. I mean, I gave up and finally got an Alexa, but I was like all Big Brother worried for a while. And I was like, wait a second, I don't actually care what anybody listens to. My husband was super bored.
My whole life is not that interesting. I know.
You're like, go for it. Skip, let's go to the next house. But your phones are listening to you. And I mean, and this has been going on for years. But what's interesting in the world of marketing is, I mean, even like from 4.5, 5 years ago to what it is now is drastically, I don't even know how to say that with enough emphasis. It's drastically different than it was before. The things that I was doing as a marketer 4 or 5 years ago wouldn't even dream of doing now because everything is digital. Everything is on the web. Everything is social media. And what's awesome about that, and what's awesome about Facebook and Instagram is the cost to advertise. So as a small business, as any business, but especially as a small business, you can get way more traction and way more bang for your buck now as an advertiser than you could ever do in the past. Yeah. So in the past, it was like, if it's print advertising, if it's television, radio, whatever it was, the cost factor was such an issue for many companies, and you're looking at a minimal reach sometimes. Right. Not all the time, but sometimes. And for the smaller business owner, that's just not a reality that you can face at that time. But with Instagram and Facebook, it's just your cost to get in. I mean, you can boost an ad for $20 and you can increase your reach. Yeah. So that's pretty amazing. What I'm seeing as the biggest trends in marketing is being authentic. And again, that's an overused word a lot right now, I think. But again, yay to the millennials that they have sourced out those companies that are not being authentic to their brand or what they say they are. And your brand has to be authentic. If you're selling one thing and doing another, people will call you out. They will recognize that. And that dynamic will shift very, very quickly. And I love that. Right. I love that trend. But in addition to being authentic, you see more storyteller series and more content. It's all content driven. So you can't just slap an ad out there and expect somebody to jump on board. You have to tell a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, for example, like our podcasting is the fastest growing thing beyond like the articles. And videos get better, but I think it's, because people like to hear, they like to hear from people themselves, not have it distilled through some filter that, may or may not be accurate.
Right.
So what do you find is like the biggest shift from 4 years ago to now? Besides digital,
print and television,
just done.
I mean, it's not entirely done. I think that publications are getting smarter because they see that it's just not going to be the same. People don't have thousands and thousands of dollars for ads as much as they used to. But what I see too is, and what I think is ultimately most important for any organization or business is what is your strategy? Because you do have to have a strategy when you're going after this, because it is overwhelming. I think the landscape, and jump in, you can tell me to be quiet any moment. Because there are so many avenues for advertising and marketing and public relations, and everybody likes to take all of these different things and group them all under marketing. That's also overwhelming. So when you're talking about advertising, when you're talking about public relations, when you're talking about your brand, when you're talking about culture, everyone likes to just take that and throw that in this big marketing pot.
Yeah.
And really, you have to have strategies for each one of those things because they each mean something different.
Wow.
Yeah. So speaking of print, I feel like Rochester, though, has a unique market for like magazines, like Rochester Women's Magazine, like the Wagazine.
Right.
There's a ton more that are just, Rochester Magazine.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a unique market or if you are seeing like changes that you're having to make with print, or
so I don't feel like I've been at it for long enough to give like a really definitive answer, but I will say that I am astounded at the number of people who, when they find out that I'm doing work for the magazine and going to buy it, they say, I love to pick up that magazine. I pick it up wherever I go, men and women. And I think that's just fantastic. And I've talked to a couple of people who may not be experts or anything, but who say somehow Rochester is a good market for a print magazine. And I don't know if it is Rochester or if it is the kind of thing where I think that people still like to pick up a magazine and flip through it.
I still get all my magazines in paper, and I know I can move to digital, but I just don't. It hurts my eyes, to be honest. Like, I'm looking at a damn screen so much that I don't want to look at it anymore. But I mean, to be honest, like, we put out a digital magazine. We really wanted to do print, but it was just cost prohibitive. To do like a small, maybe moving forward, we just didn't plan. Well, I wouldn't say we didn't plan, but it just, it wasn't going to work out financially.
I love it. I loved your digital magazine. I thought it was great. And I was like, this is what I would like to see for Rochester Women Magazine. I'd like to see something just like that.
Excellent designer who was a woman.
Okay, cool. What I loved about that is that you had a couple of videos that so you were going through and you could click on the video and watch that. I think that is super cool. Obviously that's nothing that you could do with print, but I'd love to see our magazine, pick it up and read some content in the physical magazine, but then for each article be able to go online and have something to interact with online.
Yeah, and we talked about that, like if we had done it in print, I think if you're interested enough, you absolutely will say, oh, just, put Rochester Women's Magazine into YouTube. I think you would do that. You'd have to be really interested, whereas in ours, you still had to click on it because we, again, didn't pay for the super professional level where it would play in magazines, so you still had to take an extra step. But it was a risk, and I think it paid off. I mean, like you said, I would have loved to have done print, and maybe that'll happen in the spring here, because we did think it was a value to Rochester, and whether that's again like a niche or not, I don't know. It seems to work, but it's just like, the business model that we had planned out wasn't going to support it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's all, it all comes with progress and time. And what's interesting too, even I'm a I'm a big fan of the written word. So, that's kind of, the written word is kind of my homeboy, like that's kind of what I go back to. But I think that what's interesting even about how marketing is changing and how that landscape is changing is that you can be so much more inventive now than you could, I think, ever before. So you can have the written word, and then you can also tie that into behind the scenes things.
Oh, yeah.
All these things that you could never really execute on point through a written publication. So I think that's going to be an awesome avenue for you, an awesome opportunity. I'm sure you're like so overwhelmed.
It's a little overwhelming.
It won't be
pare down
another
that to-do list.
By the end of this calendar year, it won't be.
I think so. I think, it's already a really well-oiled machine. So,
it's been
it's just my...
Has it been 20 or
20
30?
years?
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was been 20 or 30 because I did just, my husband actually brought one home for me from, I don't remember where he was actually.
Okay.
I don't remember.
In a lot of places. I think I looked at the distribution list and it's like over 400 places in Rochester,
amazing.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and like, we're like waiting room capital of the U.S.,
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's why we're like a little bit unique, and like it's just everyone gets it, because that is when I pick them up a lot of the times when I'm in the dentist or like in the subway or whatever. But I think it was the one with Sherry on the cover. That's the one. So I think that was, it might have been older, like a couple months.
That's our most recent issue
so it's
in
not,
November, December. It just came out.
Ooh, I get that.
Yes.
Well, and I think that, to the benefit of Rochester Women Magazine is that you have a sort of niche market too. You're talking about women, obviously.
That's right. Yeah.
And what a great avenue, like what a great thing to be doing, because there should be more of that, I love seeing female-centric publications. It's great because it's, it is an interesting dynamic right now. Obviously, like you hear about fair pay, you hear about all of this stuff, but there are leaps and bounds still yet to be had for women.
Absolutely.
And the more that we can continue to wave that flag, I think the better it is for everyone, men and women, to kind of normalize this, even though you'd think it's normal, but it's not even entirely normal yet,
Not quite yet.
There's still good old boy clubs. There's still, all of that exists hardcore.
Yeah, we still very much fill gender roles too, I think.
Absolutely.
Very, very much.
Yeah, guess who's going home to do the dishes?
Right. Yeah, I was going to say,
Let's just be real.
Because when you were talking about podcasts and listening, I'm like, well, I listen to it when I clean and when I cook. So talk about gender roles.
Right.
That's what I do with my free time.
That's right.
I clean and cook, although some of that's like whatever, my hobby, not cleaning, but
cooking. Yes,
I like to bake.
You enjoy
so baking is my hobby.
Yeah,
that's nice. So well, that's fun. I'm going to fully expect some baked treats next time.
I brought some yesterday. I brought some yesterday, and we did reserve a domain name for me in case I ever wanted to do a bakery.
I love that. Oh,
I don't know. I feel like that's a saturated market. I'm not that great.
But
then again, it goes back to what we were talking about.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that you just said that. When you think about stuff and you're like, well, God, it's a saturated market. Right. What do I have to bring to the table? And there's only one unique you.
That's right.
I'll say if it's some extra income and happiness, then what does it matter?
Right.
And you could be onto something amazing and you just don't know.
Yeah. Right. But I was just going to say, if you let that voice say, it's a saturated market, I'm not even going to try, then you could be, closing the door on something that could be really amazing. Or even if it's not amazing, it could be something that brings you a lot of joy.
Yeah. I think a lot of the conversations I have with people who are thinking about entrepreneurship are just like, basically they hate their job, and they just don't find any fulfillment.
And anything has to be better than this.
Right. Which sometimes is not true. That's the biggest thing. It's like and I think that's the beauty about entrepreneurship. It's like if you're unhappy with like what you're doing, then change it. Nobody's stopping you. I get it if you have financial commitments, totally get that. And you have a family to support and have debt, but there are ways around it,
There are, and that's a great point to be made, because it's so true that a lot of people will jump into entrepreneurship because they're just trying to escape something.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective, growth equals happiness. And I think that's true in a job. And I think that's true when you own your own business. You have to be growing and going somewhere and making progress in order to be happy. And there's all sorts of studies that Harvard has done to kind of support that. But when you're in a position that you hate, I think I would just urge people, and again, this is like my hippie self-love coming in from all of my self-help books, but I
need to read these.
Yeah, right.
Then find a different quest.
Yeah.
Find a different quest in your full-time job. Find a different full-time job.
Right.
And because entrepreneurship, there's nothing easy about that. And there's nothing that's just going to automatically bring you joy, but it's because all of the Instagram, everybody's like, that looks amazing. I should do that.
Yeah. And we were talking about this too the other day. We're really excited with the foundation and what we're doing, but in another year or two, I don't know, we might just be, hopefully not, but we might just be doing a lot of management, and that's not, what we originally wanted to do. So you kind of, sometimes it depends on what really gives you satisfaction. If it's that ideation and starting something new and going through those challenges, then it's time to move on. Not saying that's what we want to do, but it's just envisioning that there are life cycles in things and people fit into them.
That's right. Because I think there are some people who like the management part of it, who would enjoy
who don't want risk.
Yeah.
Some people who want it figured out and just are, their strength is scaling and growth. That's not mine, So yeah, there's all kinds of different niches for everybody.
Yeah, there's people who like accounting.
Yeah, I know. Yes, we hire those people.
Yes,
right.
Yes. Thank God for them.
That is not me either. Not me.
But what I will say is what strikes me about today, and I have to say it before I forget, what I love seeing is we have 3 women in a room all talking about how to be supportive of one another and supportive of a community. And I don't think it was always this way, or it was a much smaller demographic of women who would do that. And it does kind of strike me a little bit, and actually kind of borderline makes me emotional, because again, I will give some more credit to the millennials, because this is kind of their generation that's spurring this a little bit. Women are far more collaborative than they are competitive these days.
That's interesting.
And it's beautiful, right? It was not always that way. And I even think about about 20 years ago working with other females, it just was not always hey, how can we support each other? It was hey, how can I scratch your eyes out when you're not working?
Right.
Right. But
yeah, that is really true. Yeah.
Yeah. I came from a scientific background, and still there aren't that many women at all. And I feel like it's still like that, because it's just really hard. You have to be really tough. And even the women I see out there are really fighting really hard. And I don't think you can show any weakness in that field yet as a woman, because you just won't make it. That's what I saw. I'm in science for 5 years or so, but I can't imagine it's changed too much at this point. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm sure someone will let me know.
And I think that's, again, tell me what your feelings are. Universally, don't you feel that's how women kind of have to be?
Just a little bit tougher in order to survive. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in some ways, I think we just are, but somehow we've gotten the label that we're not, maybe because we're able to, I don't know, show emotion and show vulnerability a little bit more. But you can, it's just, you can be strong and be vulnerable at the same time. 100%. And I think that's probably better overall, if I could put a label on it, to be a little bit vulnerable, and that's part of what makes you strong.
Yeah. Relatable.
Yeah.
Which is super important, especially if you're a leader, I think.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And I'm looking forward to that being more widely accepted.
Yeah.
And I think, in smaller communities, you see that progression hasn't happened quite as quickly as you do in larger metro areas. So I look forward to seeing that in some of the smaller communities. And Rochester's kind of mid-size or whatnot. So you have like the old school mentality still. You're in pockets here and there. So yeah, to be a female that does have that vulnerable side, and not to have to be so buttoned up all the time, because that's what we've been told since childhood, is that you have to be buttoned up and perfect and say the right thing and have your hair done, and have your makeup right, and have the right outfit, and you have to present well, and you have to stand there and smile nicely and nod your head when somebody is talking. And man, as a woman who's literally never been like that, like my entire life, I have not been like that. To have that part accepted too, that there are women who are more outspoken and kind of take up some presence in the room, and we don't have to be afraid of those women. We don't have to tear them down. We don't have to tell them that they're too much, or that they need to change how they're operating. It'll be nice. I hope I see it in my lifetime, where we see more women take the stage like that.
I think we will.
Yeah.
It's happening now.
I think so. Yeah.
And you're profiling them in your magazine.
Yes.
Right.
Putting them front and center.
Yeah. One thing that I'd really like to see more of is more diverse faces in
Absolutely.
in the magazine, and just in general, talking about business ownership. I'd love to see more diverse entrepreneurs be able to come forward and take the spotlight.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's the large part of what I'm going to be helping with for the next 2 years of my life, which I'm really excited about, especially the women aspect, because, as a whole, I think it's a little bit, women are facing unique challenges, and then we're just talking about women, but I think, women of color, especially with Black women, for example, I think they're facing a lot of significant barriers, and they're forming companies faster than anybody else, but they're not getting the support. Okay. So,
let's do whatever we can.
The playing field's not level.
Right.
So how do we make it better for everybody?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's there's some fascinating research out there.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to put a call out there from the magazine for those women, any women who want to reach out and tell your story. That would be really great.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So on that note, we're getting close to the end. So if you both want to give final thoughts on where people can find you and get in touch with you and your endeavors.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been very interesting. Christi, you have a lot to say, and it's awesome to hear you. No, I don't mean it. I don't mean it in a bad way at all. That could have been taken the wrong way, but please don't. I think it's really, I'm sitting here going like, I have nothing to add because it's so great. So in terms of the magazine, the website, I believe, is rwmagazine.com. I think that's correct. I think Amanda's maybe looking it up right now.
We'll put it in the show notes too.
Okay, cool. So. Yeah, we're on Facebook also. We're also on Instagram. I'm trying to get that page going, although I'm not very savvy with that. Reach out those ways and pick up a magazine.
How many locations did you say?
I think I was looking at, I think it's like 400 some.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it is rwmagazine.com.
rwmagazine.com. Thank you. And then, we'd love to put it other places too. So if you know of a place where you'd like to see it, let us know that one. Yeah, we should bring it here to Collider.
Might be downstairs.
I bet you it's at Blue Duck. Yeah.
But we don't always, everyone doesn't go down there.
Sure.
So please bring it up.
Okay.
When
done.
you deliver.
Yes, done.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Jenny was on the cover from Blue Duck.
Right.
You can find me at millhouse.design. So I'm on one of those new millhouse.design. I am on Facebook and Instagram, so I'm relatively easy to find. It's usually mill_house_design. Come and check me out. feel free to reach out, even if you're kind of curious, if I can come help you a little bit in your home or your office space, I would love to. And no project is too small, even if it's like rearranging your furniture and picking out paint colors. Call me because I live for that stuff. I am like a nerd that way. But
Nice.
so yeah, and I guess if I had a final comment for anybody who is thinking about like how best to decide like what you want to do in life and like overcoming like obstacles, the number one thing that has helped me over the last couple of years is when I am facing a large decision, I ask myself, does this expand me or contract me? And does this align with my personal values?
That's great.
And I think for anybody that's in business, going in business, making business decisions, it's a great question to ask when you're faced with something challenging, in my opinion.
That's excellent advice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much to both of you for being here today. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time and coming down.
I love this. I can sit here and talk all day.
I know. I love it.
So thanks so much to Emily and Christi for having that wonderful conversation with us that we are resharing from November in 2019. So that's a wrap for us at the podcast today. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It's a huge help to us if you rate the podcast wherever you listen in so that other people can find it. And we hope that you stay tuned this summer as we reshare some of our favorite, your favorite, and some of the most downloaded podcasts over the past 5 years of storytelling on Rochester Rising.